Welcome. My name is Christopher Peter and I am a political economist providing a common-sense perspective on salient current events. How do the best-run sports teams remain in contention for a prolonged period of time? Typically by having leadership that understands the need to maintain pipelines of talent that can contribute to the overall objective every cycle. People that fit their culture. And when there is a lack of fit or bad apples, they make changes immediately. The same for a business. The pipelines of talent from top university programs will help stock organizations with strong minds that can drive innovation, efficiency and growth for the near to mid-term. But leadership must understand the need to ensure that every action, project, and direction of each individual business unit, department, and team operate in the best interest of the stakeholders. When you are trying to coalesce groups of people and guide them to the same goal, you need to make sure that the people you bring hold the same shared values of the group and can work toward the same desired outcomes. You should value the uniqueness of the individual, but need to respect the need for the objectives and well-being of the group as well. In this episode, we are going to discuss why some important institutions are struggling in recruiting and the impact that it has on their stakeholders. So, let us begin our diverse discussion of issues in another special episode of The Review. Badly managed pipelines lead to bad candidates and bad results. There is no argument against the fact that the Democratic Party has a troubling field of candidates that it will have no choice to feature during the upcoming midterm election. This is not a result of the moment, but an outcome following years of political pundits and their own commentators speaking of the glaring lack of candidates and ideas from their party. Back in 2020, the field of Democratic hopefuls for the presidential nomination was so radical that the primary cycle really had no choice but to make the third time as a charm barely functional person their candidate. There were a good number of people on the debate stage, but each one of them was racing for the same space and point of view. No intellectual diversity. Since then, the party has lost its center-left foundation, as the young progressives clearly took over the party, having more influence in fundraising, shifting the party focus away from a broad coalition to one centered amongst the fringe of society. They chose to platform the radical hysteria-driven and not well-informed members of their base. Embrace low moral, no values individuals. Political parties are going to want votes from wherever they may come from. But there is a difference between platforming the fringe and those groups just connecting with your policy without a direct intent to engage those groups. And that matters because the media narratives around Republicans are proving greatly hypocritical now that the same voices are not consistent with their talking points. Republicans never openly catered to fringe groups, the media just portrayed them as doing such. Democrats are clear as day platforming people who hate the United States and embrace the radical views of the worst societies in the world, seemingly as if these individuals are plants by our nation's enemies. But they may just be severely misguided individuals. Consider that the party which persistently uses fascism in their political attacks and narrative campaigns actually had no problem with a candidate that embraced Nazi logos. They defended him until recently when it came out that he allegedly sexually assaulted a liberal woman. Why the ideology matters is because he was accused of sexually assaulting another woman, but Democrats and the media seemingly were willing to overlook it because she worked for a conservative organization. Demographics are always more important to them than principles, values, and mainstream morality. So it is not surprising that they are drifting away from the mainstream and towards the fringe. While Republicans appeal to ideas and principles that are beyond the economic literacy of the average person, Democrats target youth voters. Why? Children are our future, but young voters are highly idealistic with little to no actual experience. Many of our youth that are sympathetic to the current Democrat platform are ones that are shielded from ever working for their keep. They are either born into a high-earning household or paying their way through college without student loans. That lack of real-world perspective and how the world truly works is something that liberal politicians exploit. Focused heavily on theoretics without context, many of them do not understand the realities of the ideas that are being pitched to them. Unfortunately, the college-educated may be even more susceptible, as the environment is full of extremist educators and lifetime students that prey on those trying to expand their knowledge and their mind. Typically, people grow out of the radical sympathies as they gain more life experience, career growth, and start to relate to those that came before them. Many people try to find ecosystems that provide echo chambers to amplify beliefs that they should have abandoned long before. While there are many normal, well-adjusted conservatives and liberals, these groups are no longer of any interest for Democrats. So, in a way, we can understand why their politics and strategies seem so wildly out of touch and how their priorities are completely irrational. When you appeal to people who are irrational, you are not going to be able to discuss ideas, reason, and historical context. They are driven by basic emotional responses, how something makes them feel, what something looks like. That is why you see the pool of Democratic candidates being recruited based on what they look like, what they associate with, what they own. rather than what their ideas are and policy positions. Because those do not matter when the candidates will simply fall in line to promote the agenda they are being compensated to advance. They serve a purpose, not for the people voting for them, but those recruiting. All the candidates from the Democrats are advancing the exact same narrative aimed around the fringe. Then they hope the identities will appeal to the voters. For instance, they recruited Graham Plattner in Maine because of their struggle with the working-class voter. So, they fabricated a character but completely ignored his true character issues. Sold as an oyster farmer, hunter, an entrepreneur from humble beginnings. Yet, he was a silver spoon-fed person without a real job. His parents were his landlord and only customer, and the only thing he hunted were unsuspecting women. But Elizabeth Warren described as her type of man, and prominent Democrats lined up behind before they all fled. The slate of candidates, including the mindless meathead nominated in Texas, is a sign that the Democratic Party is no longer a rational party. James Tallarico is a perfect clear example of why people cannot trust Democrat politicians. His radical statements about religion combined with his fake attempt to connect with religious voters. Like Abigail Spanberger, he is another candidate that will say whatever to try to win, except her lies were congruent to her overall false message. And many of their candidates should not be permitted to be on ballots based on the strong declared hate for America. Anyone that shows hate for the United States and desecrates our flag should never be platformed to serve in public office. How can you pledge to defend the Constitution of the United States if you hate it and everything it stands for, except when you can hide behind clauses for their hate? The Democrat Party once was the party that did not have room for hate, but it is clearly welcomed in their modern era. They platform anti-Semites, anti-Christians, anti-Americans, and any person willing to commit violence, political or traditional. The party is lost and is unsalvageable at this point as its leaders are incapable of cultivating a balance. Again, it is one thing for the fringe to vote for your candidates without an open invitation. It is completely another to have them on the ballot.
Not all change is good change. There are some versions of change that can help lead towards a desired overall goal, and others versions that are detrimental to our society and need to be defeated. Proponents of bad change will try to normalize their radical ideas by connecting it to something people are familiar with but may not fully understand. Look at the media now as they try to justify the rise of the radical Democrat socialists. They are frequently trying to connect their rise with the Republicans' experience with the Tea Party. For a person who may not follow politics, they may feel that both are political movements. But they are far from the same and are completely different. If the Tea Party got everything they wanted and saw every idea come to life, then the outcomes would be that America would have a federal government and state governments closely bound to only what is expressed in the Constitution, would have a much smaller federal budget and national debt, because a greater focus would be on preserving taxpayer dollars and keeping income with those who earn it. Democrat socialists want to eradicate Western civilization and destroy our American way of life. This is not something that is being deduced from interpretations of their writings and speeches. They are not hiding their radical misleading dogma. They want to fundamentally change our society based on demographics and communist values. The same oppressive views that have caused so much death over generations. The Tea Party just wanted people to go back to following the Constitution and stop the bloating of government that inserts the federal bureaucracy into healthcare, school lunches, and other facets of daily life better served at the local level. The current movement is the embracing of the Soviet mentality that killed more people than any system in the history of the modern world. Democrats want to try to justify their embrace of radicalism by pointing out Republicans embraced the Make America Great Again mantle championed by President Donald Trump. But the MAGA movement is aimed at improving opportunities for Americans of all backgrounds, making Americans the center of our government's interests, and making our policymakers put our interests at the forefront of their decisions. The distorted view of the movement done by the media is not logical. It is like saying a person should not love their family and put their interests at the center of every household decision made. That is common sense. Our elected officials should put Americans at the forefront. That is not what these socialists want to do. They are driven by revenge because of what are clearly mental health issues, as they persistently view themselves as victims and never realize the agency they have to achieve the same success that other people have. Rather than compete, adapt, and improve, they want the government to punish those who succeed and place them at the forefront. But that is a fairy tale. If these people studied communism and socialism, then they would see that this form of government and choice of economic system is far more exploitative than any democracy or free market capitalist system. They would realize that communist and socialist governments eventually devolve into dictatorships. And those dictators have no use for the people that they used to rise to power once they reach their objectives. The pure naivety to believe that it will be different here than elsewhere is a fool's folly. Once again, we have to fight extremism. This time at our front door.
We need an economy of creation, innovation, and growth. That is what will elevate people out of poverty, create a more sustainable middle class, and provide generational opportunity. That is what free market capitalism offers American workers and households. American workers of all backgrounds have so much opportunity and agency over their economic lives, but are not aware of it. Our education system focuses on conditioning our nation's youths to be a part of something rather than being the start of something. We set up a mentality that you must fit a role rather than offering the broader view that you can fit a role early in your career, but also look to branch out and start something better. I strongly believe that the United States of America does not need a fundamental shift in our structure or values. I think we need to improve how we prepare youths for their economic lives, how we handle transitioning workers who need a different career path, and how we allow for greater competition, growth, and innovation. Centralizing economic means and power does not produce innovation, wealth expansion, or efficiency. For the same reason why monopolies are not desirable. There is no incentive to be better for the consumer. Only the incentive to do the bare minimum to avoid a coup. That is not the dream big economic view we want in the United States. Jealousy, anger, and resentment are not good values. They are signs and symptoms of personal flaws that hold you back. Not everyone will be compensated the same, as there are differences in performance, strengths, and weaknesses. Many people choose these petulant emotions because it temporarily eases disappointment. Look at Graham Plattner. He blamed Democrats for his situation, completely playing the victim. I doubt that Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries chose his offensive tattoo. I doubt that either one told Plattner it would be a good idea to treat women disrespectfully, sexting, or create a career story around doing chores for your parents. Maybe they did the last one. The reality in life is that sometimes we feel that we are doing our best, but we are either not meeting the quality expectation or more likely we are not communicating our achievements and efforts effectively. Some people are good at being front-facing, but absent when it matters most. Others drive production and get projects to the finish line, but are overlooked. The solution is not to be jealous or resentful. It is to learn how to better communicate and how to identify opportunities to let your efforts be known to leadership. It is a skill to be able to communicate upwards, downwards, and any direction that is needed. As Christopher Peter said early this year, we need to just be willing. We do not need an economic revolution. We just need people to have self-awareness and the perspective to be better. It is not the end of the world to find shortcomings in yourself. Everyone has them. It is bad when you are not willing to address them and blame others for your complacency.
There is always a chance that you will become the thing that you hate. So it is important that you never lose perspective on your values, what is important in life, and where your moral compass directs you. Because our politics and social debates can be emotional, tense, and personal, people can start to exemplify the behaviors and attitudes that they vehemently oppose in others. When they go low, we go high was a sentiment that Michelle Obama proudly stated at the Democratic Convention. But the worst moments in our recent political discourse have been committed by her fellow Democrats and progressive sympathizers. For quite some time, political violence by the left has been overlooked as emotional, liberals expressing their feelings. Then it grew deadly. The party that proclaims that they have no place for hate seems to have no problem stating all the types of people they hate and wish violence and harm on. And the people they proclaim to love tend to be ones who have willingly committed violence and crime or commit atrocities. Yet, they strongly hate the people that are trying to stop those atrocities and bring justice. They claim to value diversity but want to use identity to implement new forms of discrimination in our society. They seem to be okay with using identity to determine right or wrong, access to economic opportunity, or whether you can be heard or not. Look at how quickly they were willing to look past a sexual assault accusation simply because the person was affiliated with a different ideology. Progressive liberals always hold the most extreme views on every issue. In the situations with police-involved incidents, they want to defund the police and release everyone from jail, rather than simply holding bad actors accountable, or implementing the available technology so we know what actually happened. Instead of trying to remove identity from being a factor at all in societal and economic decision-making, they want to use it as the main criteria. Like, more discrimination is good for society, a rational person would clearly see the way forward is to move towards a colorblind approach and put merit and demonstrated character at the forefront. How strongly do they really feel about the climate agenda when they defend the greatest sources of pollution and carbon while not abandoning the same practices they claim are part of the problem? Hypocrisy is the enemy of credibility. While most rational people focus on being more sustainable, recycling, and reusing things, these radials want to end everything, except for things that benefit themselves. Progressives do not operate with middle ground. If you disagree with them, they view it as justification for violence against you. They are growing incapable of intellectual discourse and respectful conversations. Rather, they want to bully you, intimidate you, all to coerce you to their side. And they resent anyone who resists. The resistance is not liking resistance. We need to resist the growing sympathy for communism. Extremism exploits tension and division. People become so blinded by their political hate that they embrace harmful ideals and proven fails and dangerous dogmas. We must elevate our fellow blue-haired Americans to get back to reality.
Has the tide shifted in the National Basketball Association, from the league being a Western Conference-dominated league to a new power growing in the East, following an unexpected win by New York and free agency dominated by Miami, Philly, and Boston? For quite some time now, the manufactured prevailing opinion in basketball is that teams in the Western Conference are built better than teams in the East. Despite the championships won by Milwaukee, Boston, and now New York, the narrative is still maintained. Teams like San Antonio, Oklahoma City, and Houston have young talent and roster depth. But the East is no longer chumps, at least on paper. While I do not think the New York Knicks will have that same magical dominant run next year, they still have talent to compete. Boston is always a contender for another title, despite recent moves. And thanks to a head-scratching trade within the division, my Philadelphia 76ers have potentially propelled themselves to top of the list for championship contenders from the East. We cannot write of the potential the Miami Heat have for next season, but they traded a lot away to get the Greek Freak, but still have some pieces to play with him that are experienced and might make Miami formidable. The Raptors hope to reignite their hopes by reaching into the past with their trade for Kawhi Leonard. Teams that win free agency do not necessarily win later on at the end of the season. Sometimes these moves just set the foundation for future success. Some of these new additions need a couple of more pieces or experience playing together. We saw that with Miami following the decision. For teams like Philly, the need is more immediate, as they have late-in-career talent that could help push us forward if put in the right position and situations. At some point, we need to make the transition to the young stars in Maxey and VJ. Trading for Jaylen Brown will help with this in my opinion. And if they can add LeBron and make a successful championship run, that would really help the transition.
It would help if all those pieces come together. But there are still some formidable rosters in the West that cannot be overlooked. The Spurs are still contenders. Maybe they did not handle the emotions of defeating the defending champions as well as they needed, given that they seem to be ahead of the proverbial schedule. The Oklahoma City Thunder are not going away next season, so they can be considered a reasonable threat for a title. The Spurs did not sweep them. It went the distance. Maybe the Thunder find a way past the Spurs and their stars continue their ascent. With a two-time reigning most valuable player, they will definitely want to right the ship. The Houston Rockets are adding talent as well as the Portland Trail Blazers. The Denver Nuggets still have one of the greatest players in the game as well. And imagine, if we lose another possible talent, that we are in the mix for another California team? LeBron joining the Warriors could be a game-changer as well.
LeBron and Steph Curry playing together will be good for nostalgia and seeing two all-time greats play together. But I think that team will not be as competitive as a Sixer team with LeBron. I think we offer a greater balance of young talent that can handle the bulk of the work and veterans that can still have their moments along the way. The National Basketball Association does not have a senior tour like golf. But, of course, being a Philly fan, I want the outcome that sells the most tickets for us and allows us to compete and contend. But I agree that it might not be an East takeover. More of an East catching up a bit to the West in terms of depth and star power. Or a result of the second apron, where players will need to move as teams are unable to load up rosters once player salaries reach peak levels. That is the reason Boston is claiming they moved on from a budding superstar in his prime. But it will always be an excuse if there is a player that rubs leadership the wrong way. There is great parity in basketball right now. So it makes predicting the next champion solely on free agency more difficult now than in the past. If the belief that continuity and experience are essential, then maybe the Sixers, Heat, and Blazers are just setting the foundation for the future with hopes that there are glimpses in this upcoming season.
We have to appreciate this moment in time for Philly sports right now. The Eagles continue to contend. The Phillies have righted the ship and are set to host the All-Star game. The Sixers are able to land a major talent in Jaylen Brown, and the Flyers made an unexpected playoff run and upset the Pittsburgh Penguins, then followed it up with a bold attempt to bolster the roster. Although the Ducks matched the offer, the Flyers fans should be hopeful, as we are in a time where all our teams are aggressively pursuing to compete and obtain a championship. Not every city is in the same situation as we are. Every team made the playoffs in their last season, and we had a parade not that long ago. But we Philly fans are not going to be complacent. We want more and expect our teams to always be in the pursuit of the next one. That is what great sports cities do, and we seem to finally have the right leadership in place for all 4 franchises at the same time. That is really great to experience, and hope it pays off. We can be a big tent sports city, cheering for all 4 teams. We dropped the ball for the Sixers, but we will not make that mistake next postseason. While we are demanding, we must be reasonable as well. We cannot hope for front office leaders to take.
Do we really need an agreement in place, or should we simply pivot and create a containment strategy that isolates them completely, destroys any attempt for them to rebuild their military capability or nuclear facility, and restrain the strait? There are some people who will look at the situation from purely political preconceived notions. But the reality is that America did what needed to be done to ensure stable peace in the Middle East. Now, they must ensure that it remains viable and Iran is unable to backtrack. They must not be able to exploit their neighbors, and no one should be apathetic to them. They are who we thought they were. Radical fundamentalists in that region of the world are not able to be trusted and are extremely dangerous and evil. We cannot ignore that cold hard fact, expecting a change of heart simply because they lost so much. You can eliminate most of a colony of pests, but the remaining will continue down the same path. We should be open to diplomacy, but not take the foot off the gas. We should be less concerned with accommodating their needs than holding them accountable and ensuring that they turn over the nuclear materials and conform to normal behavior expected in the world arena.
The main issue, as we talked about a bit last week, is that we are not negotiating with a party that can be trusted. And at the same time, we have made the mistake in believing that hope is an effective strategy. While people do not want to negotiate with the proverbial gun to their head, we need to negotiate with maximum pressure on the Iranian regime. In hindsight, we should have continued to destroy their capabilities, infrastructure, and economic resources until they completely and utterly accept the terms. Giving them space to breathe allowed them to recover some missiles not destroyed. Allowed them to rebuild what they could. It may not have been the best approach. An agreement is not essential, but it does help to demonstrate a change of direction. But they agreed to terms before and did not honor those ones either. So we cannot be surprised when a pest shows pest behaviors. We need to think about effective ways to address the situation and ensure that they are not able to recover except on our terms.
We let hope blind us in the same manner that it blinded the Obama team. The only difference, it appears, is that we were a bit proactive in directly addressing the threat by destroying the sites and the leadership in place, rather than simply offering a bribe, which simply funded terrorism. We should not let our foot off the gas, bring them back to the Stone Age, and allow Israel to address their proxies. Iran is not the victim, as some on the left may want to make them appear. They are the guilty party, and are being held accountable. When the good do not act, evil wins. We cannot let evil win domestically or abroad.
Americans do not want wars forever. Neither Republican nor Democrats want never-ending conflicts. But we do not want to ever see tragedy here at home because of a threat that was not addressed. We lived through that before. And we cannot let our leaders make that mistake again. I think it is important that we have a plan on criteria where we are willing to end or not escalate the conflict. In reality, the holding out for an agreement that will not be honored may be unreasonable. Do we just have a monitoring program in place if we see any resemblance of restarting the nuclear program, then strike the sites and destroy their capabilities? While I think it is important that we were firm with our NATO allies to wake up and live up to their commitments, I think we could have used a more accommodating approach to invite them into being part of the solution, reminding them of their inability to address the Ukraine crisis, and this can be something they can redeem themselves with. NATO does need to do more on defense and should not be offended that someone finally held them accountable. In this case, they could have shown the world that they could be allies and able to prove valuable to world affairs. But they chose to be petulant.
I do not think that we can expect NATO to change its color. Despite this being a global threat, we rose to the challenge and need to have a strategy to resolve it. Our European allies are not all of a sudden going to prove reliable, especially after being pointed out for being unreliable. We know who they truly are. The focus should be the regional allies, who seem to be more aligned with the need to deal with this threat. Having an environment that holds Iran accountable and keeps a program of surveillance in place is important. There is no room to give them the benefit of the doubt going forward. If they want to have an epiphany and come to their senses, then I think everyone would welcome it. But I think we should just be realistic and make sure that they are never a weapon of mass destruction nor the means or resources to wage war. The term Big Tent Party is used by both Republicans and Democrats, but the intended meanings are completely different in reality. Generally, the requirement for being a Big Tent Party is having a coalition of support from people who may not be of the same viewpoint across all issues. In the past, Republicans and Democrats have been Big Tent Parties, where they had a mix of conservatives, moderates, and liberals. Republicans just had a mix with a greater number of conservatives. Democrats had more liberals in their mix. Both parties have recently gone through a period of cleansing per se. For a bit, Republicans went a bit too much lower taxes, low regulation, and blank checks to defense at one point, and Democrats silenced anyone who questioned big spending and explosive growth in debt, essentially doubling down on what ideas they believed defined them. Usually, those moments came in response to a political defeat. Remember, there was a time when many people in the mainstream media stated the Republican Party would never be a national party ever again. They struggled to counter the narrative by President Barack Obama, and it cost them early elections. They were right on policy, but could not articulate the message, especially against a person with great oratory ability in Obama. The Republicans needed to expand their tent. They could not simply appeal to those staunch believers in limited government, freedom, and self-determination, but try to appeal to moderates and independents that recently voted Democrat, but held values and economic interests that aligned closer to Republican ideas. They expanded their tent by appealing voters who cast ballots for Democrats but were directly harmed by purposeful policies by Democrats, like union voters who were sidelined because of climate policies. People wanted to start businesses, but regulations favored those in place already. People want the ability to speak their mind without retribution. People wonder why America always bears the cost but the benefits go elsewhere. Democrats tried to grow their tents in a way, but not by adding more voters. They seemed to prefer the back channel. The more they spoke about their ideas, the more people supported Republicans. So they needed to alter the environment. And you saw that with the massive open border agenda, where millions of illegal immigrants were brought in and placed in blue states to bolster census data. For quite some time, it was puzzling about how Democrats had bad policy ideas. The public generally opposed them, and their blue states were making a more favorable environment for them. They were not even trying to fix their messaging. They doubled down on bad ideas, failed policies, and did not show real concern over the public. They seemed completely okay with the idea of losing connection with American voters. Seemed odd at the time and how flippantly they disregarded people. But their tent expansion did not need Americans. Until now, when the gig is up and we know how they scheme to maintain political machines and maintain power. Now, they look at their tent and it is largely maladjusted individuals holding extreme perspectives and hysteria because they have never had to cope or address issues. Someone always made the problems go away for them. There was always something that did not make them have to show merit. All the moderate and center-left found more common ground with a Republican Party that moved to the center on social issues and focused around economic and global concerns. The cupboard is bare for them at the moment.
For quite some time, the narrative around the Democrats is the lack of a central leader of the party, the lack of an individual or individuals seen as the party's thought leaders. During those moments you mentioned about the Republicans, they at least had some prominent voices in the mix and at the forefront that resonated with a significant enough portion of the party. In the absence of leadership, there is not just chaos, but the opportunity for extremism to fill that void. No central core message to build off of that. The problem with the modern-day Democrat is not simply the embrace of radical ideals, but the fact that there is no clear vision and policy position that Americans can see and project themselves favorably in. The view of the world and perspectives are clearly void of reason for any well-adjusted rational person, and the strategy is simply focused on addressing the image of the issue, not ideas aligned with societal-aligned expectations, which is what one expects policymakers to do. They completely believe that identity is the answer. This is why everything is centered around opposing President Trump, Republicans, and anything considered mainstream. Notice they never really have a counterpoint. They just make uncorroborated attacks without substance. They cannot offer an alternative position and approach because their ideas have proven to fail. Rather, they are trying to focus on the picture people see, but are becoming susceptible to radical ideas that are even worse than their failures in power. As is said in some political media, that the supply of discrimination and oppression to justify identity politics is dwarfed by the demand for it by those needing it for their own personal power. So it just does not resonate with the public. Most people believe in their agency over the situation, and even ones who may acknowledge issues are not seeing the benefit of ceding control over their life to a government that cannot even provide unemployment benefits as expected. Why would a government that does not know you care more about you than you?
Creating the environment for a political party to expand its appeal to a broader population will not come with the absence of principles, values, and morals, but with being able to connect with more potential voter bases based on alignment with ideas. I think Republicans have the ability to expand their tent size in the current environment. The Republican Party has drastically altered its appeal to people who would normally be considered Democratic voters. First, they centered the party on ideas that are unifying rather than staunchly divisive issues. For issues that they were once entrenched on, they have focused more on letting the public decide. A put-it-to-the-voters approach, where it took away the need for their candidates to align on either side of the issue. A large appeal for President Donald Trump is because the agenda is focused on creating opportunities for Americans, making American citizens and workers the focus of the federal government, and ensuring that merit is the cause of economic outcomes is something rational people of all ideologies should be able to agree with. Even on controversial issues, Trump has taken the middle ground and reasonable position. While the chaotic appearance and ego-driven messaging can be concerning at times, the policy positions are largely what you want from our leader. We want our interests at the forefront of society. We do not want our tax dollars benefiting people who violate laws either domestically or abroad. We want a fair chance to compete for opportunity rather than having some pay for indiscretions of our past. We want the trade imbalances caused by bad agreements or protectionism addressed. And we do not want to see fraud, corruption, and waste continue to be a cause for the constant demand for more government revenues. A stark difference from the offering Democrats are providing. They have yet to be transparent with the whole Biden era. And the whole Spanberger debacle proves they have no intentions of being trustworthy in the future. They are embracing people that hate America not simply through sentiments, but active participation in radical groups. They continue to believe the American people need to accept what they are being told and continue to repackage radical and dangerous ideas to unexpecting Americans not born to see the reason why these policies and ideas are opposed. Two completely different offerings to the public. One believes in your ability to be all you can be and wants to give you every opportunity to achieve success regardless of background or circumstance. The other wants you to empower the government to make critical life decisions. Not a hard choice for rational, well-adjusted adults.
I think it is plain and simple that Democrats need to stop embracing and normalizing radical ideas and values. Their brand is too closely aligned to Sovietism rather than America. And it reeks of petulance. They scream to the top of their lungs how much they hate America. In turn, they hate Americans as well. But it will all change if they are in power. Failure is a choice. There will be so many pundits who continue to say it is not the Democrats' fault. The people did not hear their messages in the proper context. Society is too racist, sexist, and all the other ist. Or Trump was just too good of a candidate and leader. Democrats are always the victim. No longer the party of ideas, but always the victim and the child pouting in the corner. You hear it from Hillary Clinton, Jasmine Crockett, Kamala Harris, and now Graham Plattner. And a host of others. All flawed people who think everyone else is the problem. Somehow lack of accountability, self-awareness, and transparency is supposed to be desirable. The party is a lost cause in the modern era. Once people set aside their dislike of the political outcome, many will look at the overall record favorable and move closer to the Republican side. The once ideologically rigid party is now the party that is focused more on solving problems that get in the way of opportunity, entrepreneurship, and government efficiency. To Democrats, they believe that their messaging opposing freedom, opportunity, fiscal responsibility, and domestic and national security is something that is appealing to rational, well-adjusted voters. They are wrong. Plain and simple.
In closing, politics are about ideas primarily, then about the people promising to implement those ideas. The ideas are the most important part of the equation. Will those ideas make us more safe, more free, and more efficient? Then we can move on to the person. Is this person someone who can trust to deliver on their promises? Are they being honest with what they are selling to the American public? Are they who they say they are? I am less concerned about the image or perceptions, but more focused on the realities. What are the real expected outcomes of the ideas they are putting forward? There are always historical contexts that can help us determine whether the ideas will align with our expectations. If someone is expecting you to change your expectations or your values, then those ideas may not be the right solution. Does the person have a good character and proven reputation? Many people are playing the clip of Elizabeth Warren calling Graham Plattner her guy and her kind of man. From the allegations, it shows that she is either clueless or was willing to put politics over the people. This is a problem when political parties become monolithic to the point where they do not question the character issues. At the very least, they should have put the information out there for the public to decide. Once again, they chose not to. Personally, I do not have much trust in anything that occurs in their tent, especially now that they openly embrace people who hold anti-American, anti-democratic, and anti-freedom views. Thank you for experiencing this episode of the Christopher Peter Review. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.